Preseason testing for the 2025 Formula One season has not even got underway, but I am ready to bring you my predictions for the 2025 season for the Constructors Championship. Am I crazy for getting into these predictions now? More than likely, but it is a lot of fun. So let's get into those predictions. Hello everybody, my name is Michael and welcome back to Last to First. So kicking off things with my Constructors Championship predictions, starting out in P10, I'm going to go with Sauber. I think other than a sliver of light that Sauber saw at the end of 2024, they had a pretty awful year. They were the slowest team, they had pit stop problems, they had operational problems, management changes, and a lot of uncertainty about the Audi takeover. There was a lot of question marks as if that was even going to happen at one point. They do seem pretty committed now, but it is going to be a long road for Audi. They have a very long way to go to be even regularly fighting for the points, let alone fighting for podiums and wins. Now, they are going to have a good safe pair of hands in the form of Hulkenberg, but they are also going to have a rookie on their hands in the form of Bortoleto. So we'll see how that driver pairing works out for the year. It will be an interesting pairing, but we'll see what happens. I think overall, though, there are plenty of other teams that just have more potential than them to finish higher in the standings at the moment. They've had similar problems to what Aston have had, where they would just put on an upgrade and it just wouldn't work. I mean, just overall, they don't seem to have a good understanding of these regulations, and I think that's going to continue to haunt them in 2025. They really need to make some improvements, some big improvements this year, because just changing their name to Audi isn't going to fix that team. So yeah, once again, I think they will be the slowest team in 2025, but hopefully for them, they'll make some good progress. In P9, I'm going to go with RB. RB now officially Racing Bulls, even though they were kind of already that before. They fell into problems that a lot of teams faced last year, where they tried and failed to develop the car. They got lost down a development path, and it took them a long time to really crawl out of it. I don't think RB is going to have a particularly poor year this year, but I think their overall potential and ceiling is just one of the lower ceilings, given that they are subordinate to Red Bull. Now, I still think they're going to finish ahead of Sauber, even though they are going to be Audi soon, just because Sauber is that bad. But generally speaking, I think, RB doesn't have the highest ceiling of the teams on the grid right now. I don't think their driver pairing is going to help much either with their bid in the Constructors Championship. Yuki is definitely performing better and more consistently, but he still does have a good mistake in him on occasion. And RB has a rookie with Hajar that Red Bull don't seem to evenly want to have. They just kind of ran out of options for that last seat. So overall, I'm just not too excited about RB. I don't think they have the highest ceiling, and yeah, I think there's going to be some other teams ahead of them that are going to be able to perform better. Next up in P8, I'm going to go with Williams. Like 2024, I think 2025 will likely be seen as a year that is gearing up towards 2026. Last year was particularly challenging for them because their car was overweight, so they had to focus on that rather than putting more downforce on the car. Plus, they had Albon and Sargent crashing their cars every 2 seconds, particularly Sargent, which cost the team a lot of money. Also, even Colapinto, who crashed a lot, even though he did score them some good points, he did cost the team a lot of money. They also had to rework their entire system and processes back at the factory. That took a lot of time and effort for them. James Vowles said that everything was on basic Excel sheets, and it was really impossible to stay on time and organized. Putting upgrades on the car and everything like that was a big challenge. Now that some of those processes have been more streamlined and hopefully their drivers won't be crashing as much, I think that will aid Williams in having a better year this year. It helps too that they do have 2 really great drivers for the entire year, rather than a great driver and Sargent and a great driver and a rookie that does still crash a good bit, even though he was extremely quick. But unfortunately for them, I just think that they aren't quite there in terms of resources and knowledge to be fighting higher in the championship this year. Vowles has already said that everything is really gearing for 2026. and that is when they can start expecting better results. So I think that shows that 2025 isn't really the big focus. For 7th in the Constructors Championship, I'm going to go with Aston Martin. I currently have very little faith in Aston at the moment. They are still holding on to Lance Stroll, who had his worst ever season in F1 last year, and they can't develop a car to save their life. To be fair, though, they are still gearing everything up to be a super team that can compete with the likes of Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, and Mercedes. Not all of their new facilities are up and running, and some of the big signers like Adrian Newey haven't been able to quite make an impact yet or haven't even started yet. I would expect Aston to be pretty anonymous this year and for them to be really gearing up for 2026. Now, if they don't perform in 2026, then I think there will be, bigger concerns going forward, and I think Lawrence Stroll will not be too pleased about that. I don't think anyone is expecting too much from them in 2025, but I still want to see some genuine progress out of them when it comes to upgrades. If they can put on some upgrades in the car and have them actually work, then I think that will be a positive sign for 2026 and beyond. Even if that does work, I don't think they're going to be putting too much focus on 2025, putting too many upgrades on the car. So I don't think they're going to be super competitive this year, as they will be focusing their attention on 2026. In P6, I'm going to go with Haas. I don't think anyone expected them to be as good as they were last year when Io Komatsu took over. They seem to be getting better operationally and are getting more funding and more technical input with partnerships like Toyota. They were finally able to do some TPC runs and are continuing to gain more sponsors. Of course, the TPC runs are testing previous cars, which they weren't able to do to help out their drivers and their correlations. They're really an underdog team that I think is going to continue to punch above its weight, while some of their other teams are still getting their acts together, like Sauber and like Aston Martin. They have a pretty solid and interesting lineup. We know what Ocon is capable of. He can have some really great heroics when the car is under him, but sometimes he'll be, maybe not punching above his weight all the time. He'll have some weekends where he does go missing, but generally he is a good pair of hands. And they have a seemingly top tier driver with Ali Behrman that will likely move on to Ferrari when Hamilton leaves. So he should be another good pair of hands that'll be able to score them some good points. Typically, I feel like in Haas's history, they do well one year and then they have to bin off the next year to work on the following year. But, I think this year they might actually be able to string together another great season and really punch above their weight again. Now moving on to P5, I'm actually going to go with Alpine. It seems like the further away Alpine gets from being a Renault Works team, the more competitive it gets. They committed to not being a Works team anymore. They hired Ali Oaks as team principal and brought in Flavio Briatore, and then they had an uptake in form at the end of 2024, which was pretty interesting. All of this is almost certainly to prepare for a sale, but for now I think they might have a short-term performance gain, particularly in 2026 when they do switch to Mercedes engines, which is rumored to potentially be the best engine again, but obviously that is all extremely up in the air and unknown at the moment. But I think Alpine might be surprisingly competitive this year, but it's going to take, I think for Alpine to get fifth, it's going to take a couple of really strong drivers to make this happen. Now, Jack Doohan, who for the time being is going to be in the car, is still a big unknown. He could be as good or better than Colapinto, but he could also, be a lot worse than him. Overall, he doesn't seem too stunning, and as Flavio Briatore put it, his outing in Abu Dhabi was just okay. I could easily see them fall to 6th or 7th in the Constructors' Championship if they aren't quite able to maximize points, which I think is very possible depending on who is partnering Pierre Gasly. But I think it will be a very interesting battle with Haas, since they have a great driver lineup over at Haas. So I think that'll be a battle to watch out for over the course of the year. Now for P4, I'm going to go with Mercedes. The past 3 years is enough evidence for me to believe that Mercedes is not going to get on top of their understanding of these regulations in the final year. Nothing they have done points to genuine progress where they know why they are or are not good. Mercedes has had many false dawns in these regulations, and I don't see why that won't continue since not much is changing with the regulations, and I'm not that many personnel changes to really bring in some new information. I think it's got to be very tough for the team too, because it probably dampens their confidence every time that they seem to make progress and then get knocked down again. I'm not sure if they just need some fresh blood in that team or fresh talent in that team, or what they need to turn things around, but they definitely need something. Oddly enough, I think that it actually might help not having Hamilton this year, because he's been committed to Ferrari for the past year and some change already. So I'm sure he hasn't been focusing too much on making Mercedes better. He also really didn't have the best attitude and throughout this past year in particular, and that probably wore down on the team a good bit. He was really negative, especially at the end. So I think that probably didn't help the team's spirits much at all. But between my lack of faith in their understanding of these rules and having a rookie in the team, I think fourth is going to be the highest that they're going to get. If you like this video so far and want to see more from me, please give the video a like and a subscribe. It means a lot to me. And let me know down in the comments below what you've thought of my predictions so far. Next, going into P3, I'm going to go with Red Bull. Something tells me that Red Bull is going to continue to be a bit off this year. They certainly had some very serious stumbles last year, but they did manage to generally bounce back well last year. They just didn't bounce back to being the fastest car or the most dominant team that they were at the start of 2024. They seem to need to make some big changes to their concept to get as much performance out of their car as Ferrari and McLaren have been able to. The question is if they will be able to make those big changes, or if they are willing to make those changes in the last year of these regulations. One thing that is going for them is that they seemingly didn't take full advantage of the flexi wings like Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes were able to take advantage of. So that should theoretically be some immediate gains for Red Bull for next year. So that might help them a lot. But also, I think there is just so much unfinished tension at Red Bull that is going to come out at some point. The second that Red Bull isn't winning every weekend is the second that Verstappen starts getting upset and we start to see more cracks in the team again. And because of that, I think that's really going to bring the team down. And, I don't think they're going to quite be able to fight for the title again this year. P2 in the Constructors Championship is going to be McLaren for me. It feels a little crazy for me to put McLaren second after the year they had in 2024, but it was so very close in 2024, and I think it's going to be just as close in 2025, that really any of these top teams could win it if they make the right calls. One of the biggest things McLaren has going for them is that we know both drivers will be at a very high level. There's question marks at some of the other teams over Hamilton, Antonelli, and Lawson, while there's really not as much significant question marks hanging over Piastri and Norris's head. So I think having those two really strong drivers will definitely help McLaren in their constructors fight, but it could hurt them a little bit in the drivers fight since they likely will be taking points off each other. McLaren clearly has a good understanding of the current regs since they were generally the fastest last year and they came into contention like a rocket, but even they didn't continue to make massive gains. They put a big floor upgrade on the car later in the season, and it really didn't pole vault them any further. They still maintained, I guess, their place at about the front at being around the fastest car. It seems like there's a good chance that the teams are close to the potential ceiling of these regulations, which really would allow multiple teams to be battling it out at the front end of the grid and just allow some minor changes or some minor aspects of the car to affect their performance week in and week out. And to be fair, they probably would have lost to Ferrari last year had Ferrari not stumbled a bit like they did. So McLaren really needs to sharpen up this year to win the title again and make sure they are not making any mistakes, because it's going to be extremely close. Now for my winner of the Constructors Championship, of course the last remaining team is Ferrari, and maybe I'm hopping on the bandwagon here, but I think it's going to be Ferrari's year this year. They have some really solid momentum going into the year and a really good leader with Fred Vasseur at the helm. They had some stumbles in 2024, no doubt, in the middle of the season, but I think it was really telling that they were able to bounce back in a big way, and I think that shows that they have a pretty good understanding of their car and the set of rules. Had they not had that stumble in the middle of the year, then they likely would have beat McLaren in both the driver standings, with Leclerc beating Norris, and the Constructors Championship. This past year or so of Ferrari has really felt different than previous Ferrari regimes. There's just some type of vibe or energy or something about it that just feels a bit different. I think Fred Vasseur has really been given the opportunity to make the team his own and really do some good work there. So it's been and going to be very interesting, I think. Of course, also Ferrari has two-star drivers, one of which Hamilton, even if he isn't at his absolute best, will still be very formidable and will still be able to put in very, very good performances week in and week out. And of course, we have Leclerc, who also seems to be peaking after last year. So I think he is very much ready to fight for the title. Overall, there's just a lot to be excited about with Ferrari, and it feels like it might be Ferrari's time to finally reclaim a title after many, many years of not having one. All right, so those are my way too early 2025 Formula One Constructors Championship predictions. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of my predictions and what are some of your predictions before we go into preseason testing. I can't wait to see my predictions after preseason testing and after the year has finished. We'll see how right or wrong I am. If you are interested, give the video a like and a subscribe, and follow me on social media. I'm on X as Last to First Real, first spelled F1RST, and on Instagram as Last to First, once again, first spelled F1RST. So thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.